What is reconciliation? According to Reconciliation Australia, and what they deem reconciliation to be, and this is a direct quote, at its heart, reconciliation is about strengthening relationships between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous peoples for the benefit of all Australians. One way to achieve beneficial outcomes is through business, which is why in 2001, Reconciliation Australia was established. Today, 767 organisations have a RAP. 6,658 partnerships exist between RAP organisations and First Nations communities, and $24 million donated to First People organisations. My name is Sera Bray. A lot of people know me as Sera. I come from a community called Mbantwa in Alice Springs. I am an Aranda woman, and what am I doing at a water conference when I grew up in the desert? Very funny, my family laugh about this, but for us, water was so valuable. And I wanted to share a little story about me when I was 9 years old, sitting with my father, who's now passed away, and we're sitting in a very, very old, dry creek bed. And he says to me, "My daughter, right below us, there's lots and lots of water. Can you see it? Can you smell it?" I said, "No, Dad, I can't see anything. I can't smell anything." "Well, let's start digging, because we need water to survive. Our people need water to survive. The animals need water to survive for us to hunt and gather and continue our stories." So we dug into this creek bed and dug and dug and dug, and we ended up with soakage. And beautiful, murky water started to produce through this dry creek bed. And my father, I was just fascinated as a 9-year-old, where when I go to places like beautiful place here in Tasmania and Hobart and see bodies of water, I'm just in awe around the bodies of water. And here I am as a 9-year-old in a dry creek bed in Alice Springs, digging for water with my father, and that's one moment that I'll never forget in terms of how valuable water is for people all across Australia. My acknowledgement of country as an Aranda woman is I pay my respect to the traditional and original owners of this land, the Merwinana people, to pay respect to those that have passed before us, and to acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community, who are the custodians of this land. This lovely lady on the screen that you see is my boss, Jill Hannaford. Been with GHD for 30 years and sits on an Australian leadership team. Leadership like this is critical and instrumental in terms of diversity in action. And the quote that she shares from her heart, from a small town in Brewarrina, New South Wales, it was what drives her to actually really action diversity and inclusion in our workplace. And it's because of people like Jill that have brought a great inclusion to our leadership team. I'm very privileged and honoured to be working with Jill. But we've had quite the journey at GHD. I've been on board for 8 months, and my job is to really now strengthen our way forward with our second Reconciliation Action Plan. But what you see on the screen right now is the foundation of what our Reconciliation Action Plan is. For us, a RAP is a framework, and it's a framework for all organisations to support the national reconciliation movement. It's a strategic document that supports your organisation's business plan. It includes practical actions that will drive an organisation's contribution to reconciliation both internally and in the communities in which we operate. The RAP program continues with 5 dimensions. Those 5 dimensions include race relations, equality, equity, institutional integrity, and unity. And when we built our 5 foundations under our Reflect RAP, this is what we had come up with. And it was a collective workshop. It was collaborating not only internally with our leadership and our workforce, our undergraduates, our graduates, young professionals, but it was also with our partners and our elders in the communities. For us, having a workforce that's diverse and bringing something different and unique was really what we wanted to be at GHD. It was important for us not to get people through the door, because bringing people into the workforce, that's an easy thing. It's keeping them there. That's the challenge. So we really had to concentrate on our employee and retention strategy. Within the next 3 years of this Reconciliation Action Plan, GHD will strive for a 3% Indigenous workforce. Within that workforce, we have an internal Indigenous network. That's made up of technical professionals, Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across all of our different communities and nations within Australia. That's been one of our most successful programs to date. And we use this internal network on specific projects, especially projects that have our internal network going back into their country, back into their community, and being a part of the infrastructure there. We can't do this alone at GHD, and this was a big lesson for us. We have to have the partnerships and the local relationships. We've had many doors shut in our faces, but we've gone back to those doors, and we find that they're opening up more and more over time. Trust is obviously one of the big things working in Indigenous communities. Our cultural awareness program is not only going to be online this year, but also very intensive, not only about talking about Australia's history, but also putting practical actions around employment, procurement, and engagement across all of our leadership teams. And our Indigenous business strategy, it's through our procurement strategies and our supply chains that we can really see the change in the workforce and the dynamics and the outcomes for Indigenous people. Over the last 18 months, we've had a significant increase, up to 450% of Indigenous spend with Indigenous contractors across all different projects. And we're really, really proud of the progress that we're making in that area. That's our reflect, and there's 4 stages of a reconciliation action plan. Reflect, innovate, stretch, and elevate. Reflect is really about starting the conversation in your organisation and finding those key pillars on where you want to be. We don't want to do anything different. We just want to get better with our foundation. We know that it works at GHD. We know that we have a very, very great technical Indigenous workforce. We know that we have solid partnerships and great program partners that we're investing over long periods. And I'll talk about one of those program partners as we go on. So we're now moving into the Innovate wrap. The Reflect wrap wasn't just about, it was just about a conversation and putting together the awareness. But the Innovate is really about putting the targets in front of us, the challenges. How can we achieve a 3% workforce? How can we get a $1.1 million spend on Indigenous businesses? How do we single source? How do we continuously educate our leadership team and provide opportunities, and also aligned where those opportunities are in the communities? I mean, we're talking about some very remote areas in the Northern Territory, northern Western Australia, in the Kimberley, and also in Cape York. How do we really reach out to those businesses that are working in remote areas? And the great thing about GHD is that we are working in those remote areas and regional areas. It's because of our regional setup that we've got reach into those far-reaching communities. So we continue to build on the foundations of the Reflect wrap. GHD still continues to deliver services in those Indigenous communities. And it's not about just doing the same thing over and over again. We are becoming innovative. We are working on strategies that we've never really worked on before. And we continue to learn from our lessons, whether they're successful, whether they're failures. We're still continuing to learn from that. And we're really proud. Our people are really proud. So we're constantly, on every national event, we're celebrating what we're achieving in our communities and what we're achieving at GHD. going forward, we really want to have lasting community benefit. So we're really working, like I said, on some unique and innovative ways with communities. We're building cultural values interpretation strategies for city councils. We're doing Indigenous waste strategies and water strategies for remote communities. We're looking in food and agriculture, so we're working across every sector, every industry to help our Indigenous communities. But it's the how. How are we going to achieve this RAP? Well, we need cultural and technical learning, and we're putting together really practical cultural awareness program. I'm not bringing in multiple cultural awareness providers. I'm hiring one cultural awareness provider that will be working with us over the next 12 months to really have that consistency for GHD in terms of that cultural and technical learning. We're going to have better coverage across our locations, building those local relationships a lot stronger, going into formal agreements, bringing in those businesses, building a network. We have reconciliation champions across our business. We have advisors, we have Indigenous market groups that are set up around what they need to be achieving. We have local implementation plans that are operating in every operating centre, our 10 operating centres, with local targets that will feed into the national target. And we're really committed to working with Aboriginal businesses. Not only do we use this Reconciliation Action Plan as an internal driver and a framework, but it also aligns to the procurement policies that the Commonwealth Government, our local governments, our state governments are putting on us in terms of getting Indigenous workforce and Indigenous procurement through the door on those projects. So it's strong alignment. We had to make sure that this RAP had a strong alignment to what those external drivers were and are. Our partnerships, Career Trackers is a very strong partner. This is where we've really developed our young professionals, our technical Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workforce. This program is one of the most elite and successful programs for Indigenous people in Australia. The program is out of North America, and it's been around for 60 odd years in North America. They have a 40,000 person alumni in America with African Americans, Native Americans, and minority groups. So from 10 years ago, Career Trackers is now moving into its 10th year. GHD was one of the first companies to commit to a 10-year agreement, and we're pouring significant investment in that, but we're now receiving, and that return on investment is coming through the door, the skills coming through the door. We're getting the engineers, we're getting the architects, we're getting the HR specialists. We're going to have leaders from this really great and unique program. And if you haven't been on board with Career Trackers, it's certainly a program to look into in terms of getting young Indigenous professionals through the door. We work with the NGO Foundations around STEM, so there is a big focus around the STEM initiatives. The NGO Foundation, and you'll notice a very familiar face there with Adam Goods and Michael O'Loughlin, two very brilliant footballers, and if you haven't watched the final quarter with Adam Goods, you certainly need to see that in terms of what he endured over the last few years of his career. It's through what he has set up through the foundations with Michael O'Loughlin, where we're actually funding and investing in STEM scholars to do work experience placements at GHD. The impact of diversity, the impact that we have with reconciliation is we have significantly increased our cultural competency, and we need to. We are working on very tough areas in our remote communities through Indigenous land use agreements, native title, the Land Rights Act, the Heritage Acts, and we need to get our people culturally competent. And that's the starting point, is building that awareness. We're getting better project outcomes. Like I said, from a national point of view, we've achieved 450% spend on Indigenous businesses, and we are going to increase that over the next 12 months. We have better staff engagement. Our leaders are absolutely on board with this. We're getting significant project opportunities, and one of the things that I've been brought on to do is create the new unit at GHD. I am the Indigenous Services Leader. I have a team of 100% Indigenous team. My job is to work across all sectors around how we build the Indigenous services at GHD, and one of the areas that we have truly made a mark in is around cultural design, and working on the projects to actually capture the stories of our traditional owners into what we're building in the infrastructure projects, and it being plastered and the community feeling so proud about it. But then we're also offering end-to-end services around the employment and procurement for our clients. But there's a couple of inspiring facts that I want to leave you with in terms of why you should look into a RAP and why we did a RAP. So 1.5 million Australians work or study in an organisation that has a current RAP. 51,000 employees completed online cultural learning. 46,000 employees completed face-to-face cultural awareness training. And 3,000 employees completed face-to-face cultural immersion. $14 million was provided by RAP organisations for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education scholarships. And over $16 million has been poured into Indigenous businesses from our membership with Supply Nation, which, if you don't know anything about Supply Nation, that's where your Indigenous businesses are. They certify, they work with the Indigenous businesses around the certification process, and it's through that, through the RAP framework, that we've been able to increase our spend with Indigenous businesses. There are 19,500 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people working or study in organisations with a current RAP. And $16 million in pro bono support was provided to First Nation organisations or communities. Their facts, their statistics around how reconciliation plans work in your organisations across every sector, across every industry. Thank you for having me this afternoon, and if there's any questions, you can quickly fire off, or I'm around to do some one-on-one engagement with you. Thank you very much.
Right. We've got a couple of minutes now if anyone has some questions they'd like to fire off. Team in the middle there.
Thanks, Sarah. How active are you in Tasmania in Indigenous work with GHD, Indigenous inclusiveness?
Yeah, pretty active. We've got GHD, actually, it's our longest operating centre. I mean, we've been here 100 years, so we're very engaged with the Palawa people. We've got some great partnerships. We want to be able to increase our Indigenous services offering here in Tasmania. One of the service offerings that I didn't mention is that we are helping our clients and we're helping organisations build RAPs, and we're doing a whole lot of engagement work. So we are starting that here in Tasmania right now.
Well, I mean, that was very inspiring. Thank you. And I'm thinking our organisation needs one where I work. Where do you start? How do you...
Well, you certainly come and talk to people like me. You do. You just start. I guess when I put when I was working, I've been in construction for the last 10 years, and I heard a comment in the room just before around, the white male, the old dinosaurs, especially in construction area. one of the internal strategies is that I put a paper together around why it was beneficial. I put a business case, why it was beneficial, what were all the other universities, and there's a handful of other universities that are doing some great stuff with their RAPs. And I just presented the paper to our managing director and said, we really need to do this. Knowing the market and knowing how the landscape is shifting, you've got some really external drivers out there, and bringing that all together. But you need one community member to support that. Remember, you need to bring along the community as well. You need one community member to help you start that conversation. And whether it's you and that community member having the conversation in front of your leadership, then that's the way to start. In terms of the Career Trackers program, there was one way. My experience over the years in terms of the Indigenous participation is exposure. So when I stumbled across Career Trackers 10 years ago, they only had 22 Indigenous interns 10 years ago. Now they have over 2,000 Indigenous interns. We've got an internal network of 37 of those, and we continue to take 25 each year, and we rotate. But in terms of that, how I got my managing director on board was that I asked him to come along to one dinner. Just please, one commitment, one dinner. And my former managing director is now the co-chair of the Career Trackers program. So if you can get your leadership into these really successful programs in front of those partners, the conversation will be there. I guarantee it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lucky I don't have an AA meeting later.